Hello, I'm Gemma. Welcome to this Holy Hearth, and today I want to talk to you about matrescence. It is a word that I wish I had been given when I first became a mother. It describes that transition that we go through when we have children, when we move from maiden to mother or from mother to mother again. And it marks a shift very much like adolescence, where our brains change and physiologically so many things about us change, and our identity shifts, and our entire world and way of being is different on the other side of it, in a similar way to when we go through puberty in adolescence. So matrescence describes this complete shift that we all go through when we become mothers. And so I wanted to share some of my stories of matrescence, and the 5 shifts and their unique journeys, unique energies at each of those points. I really hope that there will be points in my story where you feel really seen, where you recognize yourself and the shifts that you've been through. And I would love if you would share some of your journey in the comments so that we can really honor these massive shifts that we go through when we birth our children. And this is not just for people who are biologically birthing their children. We know that these changes happen whether you're adopting a child. Everything changes when you become a mother. So if you're a step parent, if you are an adopted parent, your experience of these shifts is gonna be similar and also have its own nuance. So I want you to feel welcome here too, and to feel like your story is validated through this as well. It feels really important to situate my story in the place that I was in my life when I had my first child. So I had lost my mother 2 years before my first child was born, and I was not in a great relationship at the time. We'd been together 2.5 years, but it became very shaky when I got pregnant, and I don't think either of us were ready to be having a baby. I was 20 when I got pregnant, 21 when I had my first child, and he was the becoming of me. I look back now and I sometimes wonder, what would my life have been like? What would be different if I had not fallen pregnant? Because now I've spent almost all of my adult life as a mother, and I can't even imagine what I would really have done with my life. At the time, I was training to be a nurse, and I dropped out of college because it was just difficult to focus, and I was so tired, and I honestly didn't know how I was going to be a nurse and have a baby as well. So I spent much of that pregnancy feeling really lost and alone. It was like a new wave of grief after the loss of my mother, that I was now becoming a mother without her, and she would never meet this baby. And that was just so deeply heartbreaking. She had cancer, and we had spoken about my children when she was ill, and she had processed her grief at not getting to meet her grandchildren or, her son-in-law, which, obviously that didn't really work out. I felt so deeply alone in my relationship, and what was left of my family essentially disowned me. I didn't speak to my sister for a year after she found out that I was pregnant. She was not impressed at my life choices, and I didn't have a huge amount of community around me at the time. So I moved in with my partner, even though that wasn't going well, and in many ways that just isolated me further. as I moved into this space of motherhood, and when my baby was born, feeling utterly lost and like I had no idea what I was doing. No idea. I suddenly felt the responsibility of everything being about this tiny human. Every decision that I made from now on needed to be about him, or stuff that I could do with him. And so I replanned my whole life around this tiny person. And he shifted everything. I went back to college and studied art. I decided that I was going to become a teacher, and although that didn't really work out quite how I had planned it, it definitely reoriented my life around how I was going to support this tiny person. And my relationship fell apart quite quickly, and when my baby was 9 months old, we moved out and got our own place, and it wasn't a great situation. We moved house like 5 times in that first year, and we eventually found somewhere stable to live. Other stuff happened in the background of my life that meant that I didn't end up completing a degree and becoming a teacher. I instead began a cleaning business, which fit so much better around our life at that time. Let's move to the next matrescence initiation that I went through. So I got married when my first child was 12 years old, and we immediately were trying for a baby. And if you have not been through this fertility journey of desperately wanting a child and desperately wanting to get pregnant, and month after month after month doesn't happen for you, then I don't think that there's a way that you can understand. I was entirely unprepared for what that would feel like, for the depth of heartbreak, for the 100 ways that I put my life on hold, and that I put myself in a space of waiting and longing and believing and disbelieving and feeling utterly hopeless. And eventually, after just over a year of trying, we got pregnant, and we were so excited to have a baby. And again, I just was unprepared for what the next piece of this journey would be. So when I was 17 weeks pregnant, I went for a routine midwife appointment, and they checked for the heartbeat of the baby, and they couldn't find the heartbeat. And I remember being there saying, "Oh, that cheeky baby won't stay still, won't get in a good position." It is not uncommon for it to take a minute for them to find the heartbeat of a baby. Like, they wiggle about, especially when they're small. They can be hard to find their heartbeat. But she couldn't find it at all. And so she asked us to wait for a while, and then she tried again, still couldn't find it. And so I called my husband, and we went to the hospital, where they did a scan and found that our baby didn't have a heartbeat anymore. And so we ended up, I really didn't want to have a highly medicalized pregnancy or birth, really. And I had been hoping for a home birth, but they told me that I would need to take some medication to help me to deliver this tiny baby, and that I would be having the baby within the next couple of days in the hospital, and it was just I just hadn't seen it coming. And I want to share this to honor this transition of delivering a baby. Even if you don't get to be a mother in the way that you intended to, it is like there is a becoming, and there are ways in which I will never be the same after that. And so I had been planning to start a hypnobirthing course thing, and so I called my hypnobirthing instructor and said, I'm not going to be there because I'm not going to be pregnant by then. And she called me and talked me through some hypnobirthing advice, and she recommended to listen to loving kindness meditations on YouTube. And so that is what I did. I plugged in my headphones and I listened to loving kindness meditations as I birthed this baby into the world. And for all of the heartbreak, it was the most beautiful experience to birth this tiny little soul, even though she was never going to take a breath, or her heart would never beat after it stopped within my womb. Me and my husband, we delivered her. She came out in her like little amniotic sac, is that what it's called? And we I tore it open and pulled her out gently, and she was so tiny she could fit in my hand, and we called her Avo Sparrow because she was about the size of an avocado, and she was perfect in all of her slightly squishy, half-formed perfection. This 17-week-old tiny baby, not 17, like 17 weeks inside, tiny baby. She was perfect. She was my only baby girl. They only have living boy babies, and my heart feels so deeply sad that I never got to meet my baby girl. But if there is a helpful story that we can tell about these situations, someone once told me that she had experienced all of the love that her soul needed to experience in those few short months of pregnancy, that she never needed to. She didn't need to stay in this world any longer. And so she returned. And so that was my second matrescence journey. My next baby number 3, I think I read somewhere, or a midwife told me, that now that my body had conceived a baby and it knew what to do, that within 6 months we'd definitely be pregnant again, and that it would be so easy to conceive our next baby. And so I counted down those months, and we got past 6 months, and I fell into that spiral of hopeless longing again, and like did everything that I could think of just before I did get pregnant, I had some RTT, like hypnotherapy, and I created crystal grids, and I had like spell charts for this baby, and then I became pregnant. But it was 2020, so quite early in my pregnancy, I ended up, the world fell apart, lockdown, and every appointment that I had to go to, I was going to alone. I was so terrified because of what had happened before. I genuinely believed that every single time they were not going to find a heartbeat. I was so scared that I was going to have to be there alone and they were going to find out that something was wrong. And the absolute terror throughout the whole of that pregnancy. I barely left the house because no one was leaving houses, right? But also the world seemed so much scarier out there. I just didn't want to be around people at all. And then every time that I had to go to an appointment, I was really, really scared. And thankfully, everything went fine. And I was planning on having a home birth, and it was all going to be magical. And then it turned out that this baby was a little bit bigger than they were expecting him to be. And so I got transferred to hospital at the last minute. And when I had him, despite him seeming like pretty chill, they were monitoring him while I was in labor. He was really sick. When he was born, he had some combination of meningitis and encephalitis, and he wasn't breathing when he was born, so he was instantly taken away from me, and we spent a couple of weeks in the NICU where he was on like antibiotics and antivirals. And it was 2020, so the hospital was not as like accommodating as it would normally be, or so I believe. Like, there were people who told me what it would have been like in another time. It would have been different. But yeah, I got sent home from the hospital without my baby, and that was so hard to go through. I had never imagined that that was really a possibility, that my baby would be in hospital and I wouldn't be allowed to stay. But that was the way it happened, and it was only a couple of weeks. But it feels like everything in those early weeks when you've just had a baby. It felt like everything. It felt like I could not be separated from that baby. I could not go home without him. For the first couple of days, I wasn't really allowed to hold him. I was pumping breast milk and they were feeding him through a tube in his nose because he had been a really big baby. He was 9 pound 2. The amount that they fed him was based on a percentage of his body weight, I think. So they had these numbers of like how many mils of breast milk they were going to need to feed him each day. And I was pumping and pumping and pumping and trying to catch up with what they were feeding him. But because they were like just pumping all this like formula milk straight into his stomach, he was putting on weight and the numbers just kept on going up. And so I was desperately trying to catch up just to try and make enough breast milk that he could transition fully onto breast milk. And by some miracle, by the time that he left hospital 2 weeks later, I had caught up. I was making enough little tiny bottles of breast milk that was all that he was being fed, was my breast milk. And we came home in this COVID world and everything was on lockdown. It was just suddenly really quiet and still, and of that like anxiety, all of everything that had been wrong with him in hospital, it was like, you know, when you have an infection, you take your antibiotics and then you're fine on the other end of it. There could have been brain damage, but there was none. He seems absolutely fine. And so after those first 2 weeks, although we saw the consultant regularly after that, or like every 6 months after that, he has been absolutely fine. And now it's almost like that was just a dream. It was like this 2-week piece of my life that doesn't quite seem to fit with all of the rest of the story. There's not really a reason why it happened. That almost would be easier, because then I would know how to not have that happen again. But we came home and settled into this beautiful, quiet life. My oldest child was 14 at this point, so relatively independent. I mean, 14 isn't that independent, is it? But he didn't need a lot from me in a practical way like a baby does. So we sort of fell into this nice little life of almost having my first baby again. And when we were adjusted to this space of they're not sleeping, they're not actually having any time for yourself, the ways in which you lose yourself and the ways in which you find yourself in those moments. One of the things that was really strange and beautiful about this matrescence was realizing how exactly the same person I was. And I had all these stories that with my first, it had been really hard. We had, I often say, like, we were forged in fire, me, and there was a brutal entrance into motherhood. And this time round, there were no flames. I was in a relationship where I felt really safe. And although I didn't feel like it was his first child, and I was really aware that he had no idea what he was signing up. We don't know what we're signing up for, do we, when we have our first child? So I cut him a lot of slack and asked for a lot. I kind of behaved like I was a single mom again, because that felt like the right thing to do. I'm not sure if it was the right thing to do. I probably didn't handle that super well, but it was a gentle transition for my husband, more gentle than it needed to be. And we gently moved into this space of cocooning, and there was no pressure to see anyone or do anything or be anywhere, because you couldn't really be anywhere. And for all of the trauma that 2020, that COVID in general was for all of us, it was a really peaceful postpartum phase. We didn't really go out and see people and do a lot of socializing, probably until he was like 18 months. When the world felt a little bit safer and we felt a little bit more resilient. And then around that point, we decided that we could go again. So we tried for another baby. So baby number 4 took a while to conceive, not as long as previously. I like to think we're getting better at it. But yeah, there was much less pressure that I put on myself this time. I figured that if this was it for me, if that was all of my babies, then I would be happy with just those first 2 boys to raise. So there was a freedom in that. I was really conscious of not wanting to obsess about making a baby, not having that be my life. So we got pregnant again. There is about a 2.5 years gap between those 2 babies. 29 months to be precise, I think. And this next baby, I was far more chill through that pregnancy. Like having the awareness that it could go either way. I don't think you can ever unknow that. You can never unknow that you might not get to keep this baby. But I made peace with that in a new way this time round. And he was fine because of my previous births, particularly, I didn't mention this, but when I had my second, I had some shoulder dystocia, like his head popped out and then his shoulders got stuck. And it didn't feel like a big deal at the time compared to everything else that was going on, and was solved pretty quickly. But once you've got shoulder dystocia written on your notes, I think there's a sense that midwives look at that and they're like, oh, okay, because that can be really dangerous. It can be really bad. So because of that, I was not able to have a home birth this time round, or I was told that I couldn't. I mean, I don't know, I can probably have pushed for it, but I didn't push for it. I was still a little bit like freaked out from my previous birth. So we had that baby in a hospital. This time I was induced, which is, super fun. You've been induced? It's a thing. I was still breastfeeding, and I think that breastfeeding can sort of help to induce labor. But for me, it sort of helps to induce labor in a I will have contractions for 3 months before I have a baby. So this time around, I'd been in labor, I'd been having contractions. I'd been sort of moving in that direction for a week. I'd been stopping and starting, and I had been calling my husband every day, being I'm definitely gonna have the baby today. And that had happened 3 or 4 times, and he was like, damn, gotta stay at work sometimes. Can I blow all my paternity leave before we have this baby? My blood pressure was slightly high, so it wasn't super bad, but it was enough that they were a little bit concerned and keeping an eye on that at the hospital. So I decided that I would get induced. Obviously, babies come in their own time, and I really feel like you can't make that happen unless it's their timing, really. I had my waters broken. I was already slightly dilated. I had my waters broken in the hopes that would move things along, but that didn't really move things along. Although I probably, looking back now, would have given it a little bit longer. But anyway, I ended up on an oxytocin drip. It's a drip in your arm and all the monitors around your belly. So I ended up stuck in bed. Really awkward, right? So much is awkward when you're pregnant. But yeah, so then I had this baby on an oxytocin drip. The body is not so in control. They're turning up this hormone drip, and it feels now I've done this twice now. My last baby was born with an oxytocin drip too. Spoiler. But it's I'm fine, and I'm laying there with the drip in my arm, and I'm looking up the charts with my midwives on my phone and talking about astrology, giving this midwife some relationship advice, and then their shift ends, new midwives come in, and it was all of a sudden I just was barely able to talk. I was it just is fine, and then you fall off a cliff. And labor really kicks in, and it's really intense, and there is no gradual moving towards anything. It's just bam. I hadn't intended to share this much birth story stuff, but it just happens sometimes, doesn't it? So this baby, my labor really ramps up really quickly, and he pops out, as they do. I mean, it's not like that really, is it? This baby came out, entered this world, and I am shaking and covered in blood and all of the beautiful, messy wonderfulness of giving birth. And they handed him to me, like straight to me, skin to skin, all of the magic that I had ever wanted from my birth. And it is not how I had wanted it to look. I didn't want to like have drips in me and be like in hospital, but that when they just hand you a baby and it's like in your arms, and I was sobbing and I was like messy and I was shaking, and like photos of me and I just look like horrified to be holding this baby. I'll try and find them and stick them on here. But it was so magical. Like literally they handed us the baby. I looked at my husband and we were both like, oh my God, we could do this again. And then the midwives left and it was just us and this baby. And we just were like hanging out with the baby. I can't even tell you the magical, beautiful wonderfulness of that moment. And it feels like what I experienced with my second baby, like 2 weeks later when we got home from the hospital and I was finally able to like actually be with him without it being like, oh no, what if he breaks? And this time it was just magic. It was just magic. Like, I didn't even know how else to say that. That baby taught me the magic of presence, of like, just honestly, he is the smiliest, cuddliest little thing in the world. So sweet. And he is now just 2. And so he's coming into that like independent phase, which is a shock because I'm so used to him just like smiling and cuddling. And now he has all these ideas about, you know, independence and stuff. So we are navigating that right now. But it has been such a joy to have that. Like, I want to believe this is like the normal birth experience. And I know it's not everyone's birth experience, and it certainly hasn't been my normal birth experience. Up to that point, it really hadn't. Even though my first was quite a normal birth, but he was definitely not given to me straight after he was born. I think they were like, okay, let's stitch her up. And I remember him being like put down in a crib, like one of those plastic crib things next to me when he was born. Anyway, that was a long time ago. He's nearly 19. By the time this video is out, I think he will be 19, which is crazy to me. Isn't it strange to, like, for all of you mums with older children, isn't it strange when you have a baby who is 6'1" and has a beard? Isn't that just the craziest moment? Oh my God. Anyway, this is baby number 4 that we're on. He, cute little, smiley little, magical little being. We were never separated. And that was like the other thing that I wanted to speak to is like pregnancy when you have a toddler. Mums of more than one, pregnancy when you have a toddler. Isn't that nuts? So tired and so like overwhelmed by the simplest of things, like, you know, spelling my own name or remembering my birth date, and also having to chase a toddler who just doesn't stop. Wild. And so, of course, I mean, what would one do in this situation but get pregnant again? Because what is more fun than being pregnant with one toddler? Pregnant with 2 toddlers. And so my final baby, he is now 6 months. There's a reason why this is the last one. I don't think I can be pregnant with toddlers again. Honestly, I look at that tiny little baby and I'm like, oh, just one more. They're so cute. Aren't they adorable? And you just want to like, I genuinely, when I was like a single mum of one, I was like, why would anyone have more than one? Now, I look at all of my hordes of children and I'm like, how does anyone stop at like 100? You would just keep going, wouldn't you? Just because they're so magic. And I think that in many ways that is informed by my journey of like desperately trying to have children and not being able to. And I remember thinking after another month of not getting pregnant that if I ever did get pregnant, then how would you ever decide to not have any more babies? Like, each one is so precious. Each one is such a miracle. How could you ever stop having babies? They're just so precious. Anyway, here I am with like my 4th boy. This one, honestly, I started having contractions at 28 weeks pregnant, and I was worried at the time because obviously that's pretty early. You really don't want to be popping out a baby at 28 weeks if you can avoid it. And so I was pretty worried. And then I got to 40 weeks and I was like, I feel like I'm done with this pregnancy, right? My body has been practicing for like the entire pregnancy. But baby did not seem keen to come out. I was planning a home birth again, obviously. Finally was ready to have my home birth, and all the midwives were like, this is like 4th term baby. You're gonna shoot it out. It'll be really quick. When it happens, like when you actually get into established labor, it'll be quick. And I was like, it usually takes a while. But you know, I was induced last time, so who knows? Who knows? And then my waters broke and my labor didn't really progress. And so I spent then like 24 hours after my waters broke just trying everything I could to like have more contractions, have regular contractions. Like, my body's got to like do the thing now, have the baby. And it kind of didn't. I just carried on with like, contractions. And 24 hours after they had started, I then had to go to the hospital to get induced again. I very reluctantly and with much dragging of heels went to the hospital and had that baby on an oxytocin drip again. Just really lovely experience of being able to hold my baby. The moment I was given my baby, I was like, okay, I'm ready to go home now. Let me out of here. And then spent the next few hours like just kind of battling midwives, being like, I don't need to stay in for all the tests. I don't need anything. I'm ready to go home now. Just let me go home. And then by the time that they let me home, it was the middle of the night and I'm calling my husband like, come get me, take me home. And he'd fallen asleep. And so I had to wait till the next morning anyway. We finally got home and now, that baby is usually in the background of my videos, but this is the first time that I have been without him, which is mad. But it is a lot easier to focus on like talking to a camera without having to stop so much footage of me breastfeeding, because it's got to be done. It's just got to be done between every take. Anyway, this is my journey of all of my becomings, all of my matrescence transitions, all of the mothers that I have been, all of the ways that has changed. And I genuinely believe that this is not like you just do it and then it's done. This is a forever process, right? The unfolding of our lives as mothers is like, we are the mother of a baby, but then we become the mother of a toddler. And then we become the mother of a child, and then we become the mother of a teenager. And it just, the new versions of our becoming that we go through is just, it's an unfolding story forever. Matrescence is a journey that we are on now for as long as we are mothering. And it is a journey that I feel really passionate about and that I really want to support mothers through. And particularly in terms of not losing ourselves, because I do think that is something that is really common within this journey. And it's definitely been so many times in my journey, having this moment of like, who am I in this new place, in this new role, in this new season of my life? Like, how do I fit into this season beyond being like, you know, the breastfeeding person or the person who provides for the tiny humans. I am also a person becoming myself and making a space to really facilitate the me that I'm becoming, not just the mother, not just the, although like obviously me is the mother, but the person that I am becoming, the things that I want to do, the things that I want to achieve, I want to make a part of my life. Making space for that is so important in this journey. And our society doesn't facilitate this becoming, the becoming of a mother, the matrescence, in a very supportive way. There is a rise of women who are dealing with postpartum depression and like all kinds of different levels of losing themselves, of feeling completely hopeless, feeling completely lost within their own lives. And so I want to share some of the tools that I have learned, that I have gained along the way. I want to support mothers to recognize themselves again, to be able to look at themselves and see new pieces of themselves, see that they are not lost, but that they are finding something that is deeper, that is more, that is a really significant part of who they are and who they always have been. And so if you would like to be a part of my community, please do subscribe. Please do drop me a note in the comments. I have a free 13 moons guide that you can download if you would like to join my mailing list, where I send emails a couple of times a month to share some of my journey, to share what's coming through for me, and to talk about the astrology and how we can work with these lunar patterns of the 13 moons of the year through each of the seasons, and build these deeply grounding rituals into our own lives that will help to hold us through the mundaneness of the life of a mother, but also that help us to see ourselves beyond the mundaneness of this life. So yeah, welcome. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to my journey. Please do share yours in the comments. I would love to read it.